Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats Weekly Podcast Episode 90. I'm your host, Dan Matson, a.k.a. Wooden Boat Dan. If he can't do it, well, he'll probably just keep trying because he's pretty stubborn at times. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and and romance of wooden vessels around the world. Thanks for tuning in today, folks. Thanks for my little radio slip there. It's not always perfect on this show, but it's always fun. We're out to have a good time here at Hooked on Wooden Boats. Today's featured segment is an interview, actually two interviews that I did at the Olympia Wooden Boat Fair on Mother's Day weekend last month down in Olympia, Washington. Interview with Tom Pearson and Michael Fife, two different wooden boat guys, so you're going to want to stick around for that. Don't miss it. It's going to be fun. A couple of weeks ago, I requested via my newsletter and also on the show for you to submit your ideas for my 100th show, something fun or different, and I've gotten about a dozen really good ideas. So that's cool. Thank you for doing that. And it's not too late to send something in. If you want to shoot something over to me this week, that would be cool. Well, this week, I started working on my scamp. If you listened last week, you heard that I picked up my scamp kit in Port Townsend, Washington. Brought it home. Loaded it up all in the garage. There's 70 pieces or 74 pieces around there of pre-cut CNC machined precision parts. It's pretty cool because the parts that are more than 8 feet long, they actually cut puzzle joints in them instead of scarf joints. And so this week anyway, I started joining the planks end to end, the panels for the planks. Each plank is 2 panels, so there's 12 pieces that become 6 planks. So I started joining those together with the puzzle joints, and they are really slick. Man, they work good. So I'm super excited to get rolling on the scamp. I'm actually setting up a separate page on my website. If you go to my homepage, at the top you'll see Scamp Build. If you click on that, that'll take you to several pages where I'm going to track information about the scamp. So I've started laying out the pages, so it may not be 100% complete when you get there, but I'll have it done here in the next week. But on one of the pages, I'm going to track the progress of the build. I'm actually going to put up some videos and a little bit of documentation about where I'm at each week or couple of weeks. Then I'm going to have a second page that's going to track my exact cost to build the scamp and the number of hours it takes me. And I'm going to break the hours down by each stage of the build. There's 12 stages in the manual, I believe it is. So I'm using those stages to track my hours spent. And I'm also tracking the cost spent for the boat in very much detail on that page also, in kind of like a spreadsheet. So as I spend money for the parts and supplies and all that, I'm going to enter that into the log. I think right now I'm into this boat like $3,300. I'd have to look, but the kit was $2,625. And then I spent about $600 or $700 on supplies this week that I ordered from Jamestown distributors. And then I will have a third page for the scamp where I'm going to detail out some of the tips and tricks and hacks that I have learned along the way in building the scamp. So hopefully it'll be kind of a resource for people that are thinking about building a scamp or just want to track my progress kind of give you a detailed account of what the construction goes like, how much it costs, how long it takes, at least for me. And I'm not a super fast builder, I'll admit that right now. I'm probably average or below average, but I have a lot of fun doing it and track the costs and everything. So hopefully it'll be a resource page for you. You can also go to, a quicker way to get there, or easier, would go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/scamp. Now I'm going to be posting the videos to my YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/woodenboatdan with no spaces, that'll take you to my channel. I've got 4 videos up there as of this recording. 2 of those are scamp videos where I talk about building the jig for the boat, and also I show some video of putting the puzzle joints together and epoxying those up. So check it out if you get a chance. youtube.com/woodenboatdan with no spaces. So I am super stoked to be working on the scamp. I'm already having a blast with it. It's just amazing. Okay, I'd like to give a shout out to our new newsletter subscribers, Leonard Langhine, Mark Rutan, and Wim Nettens. Thanks, guys, for subscribing. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so right away. I send out a monthly newsletter with information, resources, updates from Hooked on Wooden Boats, and other fun things. You don't want to miss out, folks. All you got to do is go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe, enter your first and last name and your email address, and you'll be on the list. And you can even use a fake name if you want. That's fine with me. I don't think that's a good idea, but if you really don't want to give out your name, you could do that. But you'll get my newsletter. It's a way for me to connect with you and start to build a community of people. I think I'm approaching pretty close to 300 subscribers, which is pretty sweet. So check it out, hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. Okay, we're going to move on now to the interviews I did at the Olympia Wooden Boat Fair. First Tom Pearson and then Michael Fife. And what you want to do after you listen to this, or you could do it before, is go to the website, hookedonwoodenboats.com/090. That'll take you to the show notes for this episode. And I'm going to have a few pictures up there of the boats that are talked about in these interviews and a little write-up on what this is all about. So check it out when you get a chance. Anyway, let's go ahead and roll the tape of the interview. Okay, it is May 11th, 2013. I'm sitting with Tom Pearson on the Tugboat Sandman. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Tom, you've been involved with this boat since 2006, I think you said.
I think that was about it.
Yeah. But let's back up further. You live in the Olympia area or Shelton, and you built a boat yourself. What kind of boat did you build?
It's an Acorn skiff. It's a lap-strake boat by a British designer, 12-foot boat.
Is that by, who's the designer?
Ian Oatwright.
Oh, yeah, right.
I
never know how to pronounce that last name.
I've never been quite sure either. So I do the best I can, but he does beautiful designs.
So did you do that, did you use plywood and epoxy on that boat?
Yes,
okay.
Plywood and epoxy. Has minimal structural ribs in it, and most of the rest of the boat is mahogany.
Okay, what length is that boat?
12
foot, yeah, and it's a sailboat too.
Rowboat.
Oh, it's a rowboat.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. When did you finish that?
About 10 years ago.
Okay, very fun. Sounds like a fun little boat.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And then, so tell me about the Sandman tug here. Give me the gory details on the dimensions and all that stuff.
Well, as we said, it was built in launched in 1910. It's 60 feet long, roughly, a couple inches shorter than that, 14 feet wide, and about 6.5 foot of draft. And it has a Caterpillar engine in it now that is the third engine that was put in, and which produces 110 horsepower. And the boat will cruise at about 7.5 knots for the most part when we take it out. pretty easy to handle, really, unless you're going in reverse. And then it's typical of any single screw boat that they're difficult in reverse sometimes.
Do you have to turn the engine off to go into reverse like sometimes?
No, it's not a direct reversing engine like the Arthur Foss is, but it's as you can see here in the wheelhouse, there's the main steering wheel, there's the lever over there, which is the throttle, and then there's a smallish wheel which just shifts it from forward to reverse. So it's a clutch system.
I see. Yeah.
So at idle speed, you can just move it from one to the other.
And how much fuel do you think she burns per hour?
I think we figure about 4 gallons.
4 gallons an hour. That's just amazing to me. These old low RPM, high torque engines are really fuel efficient, aren't they? Compared to
relatively. I guess considering you're going about 10 miles on that.
Yeah, right. How much fuel does this boat hold?
Well, we've got 3 tanks. There's one at the stern. I forget what it holds, about 400 gallons, I think. And then there's 2 tanks right below us outside here that would hold about 450 apiece. But we can't afford to fill up all those tanks, nor will we need to for a year's operation. So those are full of water to keep as ballast.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
Brings the bow down a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So, so the boat is moored here in Olympia at Percival Landing. Is that what this is called? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people can come on the weekends and get a free tour of the boat.
That's right.
Right. And what's the website address for the boat?
Tugsandman.org.
Tugsandman.org. So anybody listening, if you want more information, check that out. Mm-hmm. And then, so Tom, she was launched in 1910 and worked until 1985 in Puget Sound. What kind of work was she doing?
Mostly towing, as far as we know, sand and gravel barges, but probably any towing jobs that they could do, that weren't too large for them or somebody wanted to pay for, so logs and other sorts of things. I really don't know. They didn't keep enormous records of that. All we know is it was based in Olympia the entire time.
Okay.
So, and it was up on the landing over here. There's a picture of the whole fleet that was owned by a man at one point that included this boat and several others.
I see. And so a company basically owned her?
Yeah. Let's say, oh gosh, really should have more information in here, but it belonged to a succession of owners.
And then I'm sitting here looking at a picture of this boat underwater in 1998.
Yes.
So what happened there, Tom?
The boat was moored at one of the local marinas. Apparently the bilge pump, which had to be going quite a bit of the time because the boat was in bad condition at that point, either failed or was vandalized, and the boat sank at its moorings. And once it was lifted and some of the accoutrements like the deck house and the engine were removed, it was towed to Port Townsend and rebuilt by the Port Townsend Shipwrights Co-op, or the hull was rebuilt, and then the boat was brought back down to Olympia, where the volunteers at the time rebuilt the cabin and put the engine back in.
Okay. Yeah. So she's restored to pretty much original condition.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But not, we couldn't say it's restored to any exact period, because while the deck house and the hull and all that looks pretty much like it did when the boat was launched, it has a newer engine in it, and so it's a little hard to judge exactly what period you're trying to hit.
Yeah. And what I've noticed in doing interviews with tugboat people is that over the years, the configurations of the boats change.
They do.
They change them to modify them for whatever work they're doing at that time. Change the cabins and
they used materials that they could get a hold of. For example, which is kind of interesting, the towing winch at the stern, which you saw as you came aboard, was powered, and we have the engine, by a Stanley steamer engine that ran off of compressed air. And we have that Stanley steamer engine in one of the people's shop at the moment. It's not in usable condition at present, but that's what they used because it was available at the time.
And that was used to power the
winch back there.
Really, a steam engine was. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But running on compressed air.
Yeah. Wow, very cool. Very cool. So you guys still take her out, but you can't do it for hire, but you still get her out for different festivals and things.
Yeah.
So
We've taken it to Tacoma, we've taken it to Gig Harbor, Port Townsend. Tugboat races here in the fall during the Harbor Days Festival. We go out and race.
Yeah. Is the insurance company like that?
I don't know. They haven't said anything.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So what do they do at those tugboat races? I've never been.
They divide the various vessels up into classes depending on horsepower and size to some degree, and then they go out just outside the harbor here and race about 2 miles down to what's called Olympia Shoal, which is see on the chart behind you. It's like from approximately here to approximately there.
How many miles is that?
I think about 2 miles.
Okay, 2 miles, yeah.
And get a lot of wakes with the boats. And most of the time, I think it's whichever boat makes it up to speed first is going to win.
Oh.
Because they all go about the same speed.
Yeah.
But some of them can accelerate a lot faster.
I see. Very cool. So and that's in September here, Harbor Days Festival.
Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend. Okay, cool. And this fair, Olympia Wooden Boat Fair, is always Mother's Day weekend.
I guess it is. I'm not sure about that for certain, but usually about this time.
Yeah, very cool. So, well, I appreciate your time today, Tom. Anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, but we're sure happy to have people come down and see the boat.
Okay, very good. And again, it's tugsandman.org.
Yeah, we're always looking for new volunteers.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Tom, for doing that interview. That was awesome. And we're going to roll the tape now to the interview with Michael Fife. Take it away, Michael. Okay, it is May 11th, 2013. I am sitting on the boat Naida with Michael Fife. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Nice to meet you, Dan.
Yeah. Did I pronounce that name right?
It's Naida.
Naida. You know, what does that stand for? What does it represent?
I believe that in Greek it stands for sea nymph.
Oh, really? Okay. Was that the name of the boat when you bought her?
Yes.
Okay. So, before we talk about the boat, which has an interesting history that includes Humphrey Bogart, I understand, tell me a little bit about your background, where you're from, and any boating you did as a kid.
Oh, grew up boating, a little bit of water skiing, mostly going out with my dad salmon fishing and an old Sears wooden boat with an 40-horse Elgin on the back, and my dad would catch fish, and I usually didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, that was in Tacoma, Washington?
Yeah, and that's started back in the early 60s, and the fishermen back then, they'd carry a rifle in their boat to shoot the seals.
Really?
Yep, they did.
Interesting. So were you fishing in Commencement Bay?
That's correct, Commencement Bay.
Yeah.
Out in Point Defiance area, Point Fosdick, around there. Vashon Island.
And in those days, there were some real fish out there.
Yeah, there were.
Weren't there? Some big kings and stuff?
Yeah, the big kings used to run there pretty regular.
Yeah. So you grew up in this area, and then you've been into residential construction and woodworking type stuff for quite a while?
Yeah, I was a contractor for 15 years, and then I worked for the city of Olympia presently the last 24 and a quarter years.
Oh, really? You work for the city now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah. And what do you do there?
Fire lieutenant.
Oh, really?
And been building a little bit off and on throughout my career.
I see. Okay. So tell us about this boat we're sitting on, Michael.
Well, it's a 1935 Grebe, and purportedly built in Hollywood, California, and it's 48 feet long. It's got a yellow cedar hull, and it draws 3.5 feet of water. It's got teak decks and a mahogany house on it. It's got twin Chrysler straight 8 Royals. The engines in it now are 1947. We just installed those and replaced some 1953 engines that were in here.
And those are gas engines?
Yeah, they're gas engines, and they're up with updraft carburetors.
I don't even know what that means. Yeah. What does that mean, updraft?
Well, it means that the fuel is not going to just drain straight into the top of the engine.
Yeah.
The carburetors are down below it, and the fumes have to be drawn up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you're less apt to flood your engine.
Oh, I see. Okay. So where did you find a couple engines like that?
We found them in Sparks, Nevada, of all places. And they were in an old monk, that was probably 60 feet long, but it was just falling apart. And this fella bought this boat in Portland. It was sitting on the hard, but it actually originally was from the Olympia area, and he just bought it as extra space for guests' quarters, and he has the boat sitting on a lowboy in his side yard. And he just wanted the engines out so he could have more room.
Really?
Yeah. The engines were great, but the boat was terrible.
Wow. So how many horsepower are those engines?
About 102, I believe.
Really? How many cubic inches?
I'm not sure what the displacement is on those.
But they're straight eights.
But they're straight eights, yeah.
So do they look pretty big? Are they?
Yeah, they're big. They're probably 42
so
inches long.
So they're maybe like
so.
300 to 400 cubic inches, you think?
They're probably the 300 cubic,
300?
probably right in that range. Yeah.
And so what's the beam on this boat? Do you know?
It's 12 foot.
12-foot beam,
Yeah, so
48-foot length.
Yes.
So it's a fairly narrow boat, which is typical for the way they used to build them, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it rocks a little bit, when you get in a cross current.
Yeah. So for those that aren't sitting here with us inside this boat, tell us about some of the special things about this boat, the interior.
Well, the boat's 76 years old, but the interior is actually still immaculate. You'd never guess, other than looking at the instrumentation. It's got a lot of nice woodwork in it, a lot of detail, brass instrumentation, brass throttle controls, 18-inch long shift levers instead of a joystick like you have on a lot of the new boats. It's got leaded glass porthole windows in the galley and in the heads.
Really? Yeah. And so the story is that this boat was built originally for Humphrey Bogart.
That's what we were told, and that when we bought this boat, that was the rumor that came with the boat.
Mm-hmm.
It's unsubstantiated at this point, but we'll do some research on that.
Yeah.
It's a fun potential fact at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's a picture of him down in the stateroom, or
that's correct, and that was on here when we bought it. So then they advertised it as being owned by Humphrey Bogart. But,
yeah.
So we'll just go on with that for now.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the configuration here in the cabin then? Is there 2 staterooms, like 4.5 staterooms?
Well, there's a cabin's quarters aft, and it's got 2 double beds in it, and then there's a galley and a head before you get to the first bulkhead, and you come up the stairs and you're in the main salon, and then this couch folds down and makes into 2 separate bunk beds here. And in the forward cabin, there's a set of bunk beds and then another head up in the bow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And how much fuel does this boat consume?
We estimate about 5 gallons an hour at running at about 1,700 RPM.
Okay. And what's cruising speed would that be?
That's probably 7 knots.
7 knots, yeah. Okay. And when did you buy the boat?
We bought the boat in September of 2012.
Yeah. And you were saying you have a partner with the boat, Dennis.
Dennis Backstrom and his wife Tony are partners in the boat.
Yeah. And so you guys had kind of talked about buying a boat together, and you were thinking maybe fiberglass with diesel engines.
Yeah, that was what we talked about.
Yeah, so how did you end up with this boat then?
It's Dennis's fault.
A friend recommended we take a look at this boat, and it was just too interesting and had too much character to pass up,
Yeah.
So we dove in.
Yeah. So you already put engines in her.
Yeah, we put engines in her already.
And then what other work have you done to her?
We put a teak swim step on the back. We built that, and we pulled out the galley window panel that was rotted from some caulking that was missing on the outside. So rebuilt the window panel and reinstalled that and made up some of the radius trim to go with it that was rotted on the outside.
And since you're a carpenter, you can do that stuff yourself.
Yeah, that wasn't too tough.
Yeah, and that swim step is really, really beautiful.
Oh, thank
nice
you.
job on that.
Thanks.
What other things have you got planned for her?
We're going to refinish the exterior of the house. The finish on it needs restored. It has some bubbling in it from not being acclimated last time it was finished. So
Okay.
we'll bring her back to her former glory if we can.
Yeah, and the house is all varnished outside?
All varnish on mahogany.
It's mahogany, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you going to do that yourself?
Oh yeah, I'll do it myself.
Yeah. So what, you got any good varnishing tips for myself and other people listening?
Well, make sure you acclimate the wood before you put the varnish on. And
so how do you do that? What do you mean by that?
Well, you don't want to pull your boat out of a boat house that's been sitting in for a long time and then bring it out and put varnish on the same day. You want to let it sit out in the environment you're going to put the finish on for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Let
the moisture and temperature and everything can kind of settle in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
you want the wood stable before you apply.
Exactly. And then always read your directions on your varnish, because that first coat you need to send out a lot, and it's been recommended to me that your succeeding coats be thinned out as well, as opposed to putting it on full strength.
Oh, really?
Or that it won't, especially in like maybe four parts of thinner to 1 part varnish for that first coat, so it really seeps in deep.
Really interesting.
That'll help eliminate some of that lifting. So.
Interesting. Well, unfortunate for me, I just put first coat on my canoe yesterday, so it's too late for me to do that. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, everybody has a different experience with it in whatever, different environments certainly affect, what's going to happen. So
right.
It's not a hard science, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what brand you're going to use? Or?
We'll use Dailies.
Dailies, okay.
Okay.
You've had good luck with their products?
Well, it's been recommended to me from just about every source, so.
And how many coats of varnish will you put on?
Well, probably 4 at the bare minimum, just the first season,
Just keep building it up.
And then build up over time.
Yeah. So where do you plan on taking the boat?
We'll probably go up to the San Juans this summer to really give it a workout, and then, maybe, depending on how that goes and time available, up the Sunshine Coast, up Vancouver.
Okay.
So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, this is an absolutely gorgeous boat, and it looks to me like sitting in the interior here, there's a lot of, is this tuck and roll upholstery? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, I believe that's tuck and roll.
Yeah, that was popular when I was in high school.
Yeah, same here.
If you had a 57 Chevy with tuck and roll upholstery, you were kind of in Fat City,
yeah,
right?
we kind of kid about that somebody, we robbed somebody of their upholstery out of their 57.
Yeah. So that was probably the original style, huh?
It very well might be. I don't really know. I think the boat was retrofitted once. There's some evidence of some old cabinet work behind the existing cabinetry inside the heads.
Yeah. You can wait just a minute.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
So what's that now? Some old cabinetry?
There's evidence of some old face frames behind the face frames that are in the heads right now.
Really?
Yeah, because it's all mahogany in there, but when you open up a side door, next to the hull, you'll see some remnants of an old white face frame. So they've just built right over that at some point.
Interesting. So the longer you own this, the more you'll learn about some things like that. You'll probably find some stuff that's been changed or modified or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today, Michael.
Well,
anything else you'd like to say?
No, it's a pleasure meeting you, though, and be interested in getting those emails updates on whoever come in contact with on the wood boat scene.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Michael, for doing that interview. You've got a really cool boat. It's really awesome to know that Humphrey Bogart was on that boat at some point. Hopefully you can confirm that at some point in your ownership of that rig, but she's definitely a beautiful boat. Keep up the great work. Okay, if you'd like to connect with me, you can do so by email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter, as I discussed previously. You can write comments on my website with the show notes, and you can look for me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. If you go looking for Wooden Boat Dan, you'll find me there. I also have a voicemail feedback hotline, 424-261-2360, if you'd like to give me some feedback. I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and also if you enjoy the show, please give me a 5-star review in iTunes. That would be cool. And if you like the show and want to help support me a little bit, if you make purchases from Amazon, Jamestown Distributors, or West Marine, you can go to my website and click on the banners there. And if you click on the banner and then you make any purchase from those websites, I get paid a small commission, which helps defray the costs of doing the podcast and traveling and so on. I would really appreciate that. And I'd like to thank those of you that have made purchases there. That's really been awesome. It's growing slowly, but it is growing, so that's good. Also on my site, there's a tab on the homepage at the top that says Gear, where you can buy Hooked on Wooden Boats t-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, and that sort of thing. Okay, well, that's about it for this week. If you're not in the wooden boat game, it's time you get in. There's a bunch of ways to do it, but if you're not in yet, just walk down to your local grocery store and buy Wooden Boat magazine and read it late into the morning, early into the morning, and get a dose and then go from there. Anyway, have some fun with it. This is Old Wooden Boat Dan having fun. Thanks for joining us. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. God bless. Have a great week. Talk to you next week. And for those of you listening, I'll give you a quick update on my canoe. I put on the 6th coat of varnish this weekend. At first, I thought it was going to come out a little better than the previous coat, but it really didn't. I've still got some spots that look dry. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm going to switch to Epiphanes varnish, and follow their instructions and see if I can get a good final coat on this rig, and then she will be ready to go. So stay tuned for more information about the canoe. Talk to you later. Wooden Boat Dan over and out again.